If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, let us know what you think about the episode. If there's a particular guest or topic that you'd like to have on, we love to be able to take your feedback and then be able to get those suggestions on the future episodes. Today I'm going to be chatting with Ron. He's the president of Diesel Motorsports, and I wanted to talk with him about events, competitions, sled pulling, drag racing, dyno competitions, and take a look back at how they started and then how they've progressed now into 2024 and heading into 2025. So I'm definitely looking forward to chatting with him today. Before we get to it, I wanted to give a shout out to one of our sponsors that helps make the Diesel podcast possible. Kershaw Knives has a 40% off MSRP code for you. If you go to kershaw.kaiusa.com, use code 40TDP 2024, it gets you 40% off MSRP. So it's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear if you're in the market for a new EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house. They've got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, handle design, and their whole lineup's designed to meet really any budget that you might have. So if you're in the market for some cool gear, head on over to their site and use code 40TDP2024 to save some money. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Ron from Diesel Motorsports, talking about events, drag racing, sled pulling, dyno competitions, where things started, and where they're heading to in the future. Ron, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today about one of my favorite things to talk about, which is diesel performance, diesel events. I know that you've been doing this for a long time. You've seen everything from the beginning till now, so I look forward to chatting with you, learning about how events have evolved, what you're doing specifically, and what the kind of the way the industry is going. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Look forward to talking about it, and happy to be here and still doing what I enjoy doing, which is going to the truck events and talking to the enthusiasts.
Yeah, that's really where it all starts. It started for me there, was seeing a couple trucks drag race way back when, and it just stood out so much that it changed the course of my career, the course of what I do with, my 40 to 50 hours a week. And so it's something that I like to talk about, and I really like to learn about where it started and how it's evolved. And we were talking a bit before the podcast about that. And I wanted to ask you about your background in motorsports, in the event side. Where did it start? And then if you could, kind of go through from the beginning until where we're at here in 2024.
Well, it's been almost 20 years ago, so I'll keep it brief. Before all the diesel things, I was an agency, a marketing agency, and I worked closely with SEMA and a lot of the sponsors that are behind me. And I got a call one day from a fellow that many people have forgotten about, Eric McBride at DHRA. And he said, "Hey, SEMA gave me your name as the marketing guy for trucks. And we want you to come to one of our events and let us know if we're doing something wrong or right." So at the time, they sent me down to their Houston. It was the first time they held a national event at the Houston Raceway Park. So it was good. They had rules, they had safety, they had insurance, they had nice high-end trucks. It was very well formatted. They did drag racing, they did sled pulling, they had a dyno there. They had a nice crowd, and he says, "Well, do you see anything that we're doing?" I said, "Well, you're doing a lot of things right." But I said, "I see a few things." I said, "You have 5,000 trucks in the parking lot." And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "You don't have anybody selling them anything." And he goes, "Oh, you think people would be interested in that?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I may have a few companies that would be interested in that." So the next year I had their parking lots full of vendors wanting to sell parts to the truck owners. And, that's back when advertising was still pretty fluent. So you could get advertising through magazines, newspapers, radio. So it started out there, did that for 2 or 3 years. And then he ran into some troubles, and that kind of went out of business. And two of the guys that were at DHRA called me and said, "Hey, you want to start something new?" And I said, "Sure." So as of 2025, it'll be our 18th year of doing this. And we're probably one of the few that still keep it as a sanctioning body. submitted rules to SFI. We still run our own rules, and we have our own insurance, our own techs. So we can go into any facility and run a diesel event the way we want, which is nice. Because obviously diesel trucks are a little different than, say, a gas mod or a gasser, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I want to spend a little bit of time back on the early days because it was before my time, and I've always been really curious. I've never had a guest on that I could ask this question to, but when I think back to the internet was big, but it's not like now with social media and the way people connect. So at that time, how would people how could you get 5,000 trucks in a parking lot? Was it done through forums? Was it done through how did people do it back then?
Back then, it was forums, and they had just started, so they were pretty young at that point. You saw a few people there, email, a few companies, that type of thing, and then everybody just kind of showed up, and it was amazing because you'd say, "Oh yeah, I've been talking to you for 3 months. It's nice to put a face to it, you know?"
Yeah.
So everybody gets to get together. They look at each other's trucks, or they don't know anybody and they just walk around and look at each other's trucks and see what they're doing. You know, the sport was so young, people were wanting to find out what everybody did to their trucks
Yeah.
so they could go back and do it to their truck, because there was no magazines at the time. That was before Diesel Power, Diesel World, any of them. And they really had no guidebook on to say, what should I be doing to my truck? And even the diesel shops, they were still very young at that point. And they didn't know what to do for the products. Back then, everything was kind of a bolt-on.
Yeah.
You know, bolt on a programmer, bolt on a turbo, bolt on air input, you know, and it was all bolt-on type stuff. So it's just kind of when the programmers come out. Edge was just starting to come up huge. It was the original owners, and everybody wanted to put an Edge box on their truck, turn the thing up. I used to get calls daily. They're like, hey, Ron, that Edge box burned up my transmission. And I'm like, did you read the instructions? They're like, no, what instructions? And I'm like, the one you probably threw away. It says, do not turn to level 5 unless you have reinforced this, and this. They go, oh, yeah, it says that, huh? And I'm like, yeah, it says that. But, you know, everything was still young then, and it was fun. People would show up. The industry, when it was young, they actually drove their trucks to all the events and competed in the very truck they drove there. There was not much trailering. Maybe in sled pulling, some of the top sled pulling trucks, they'd trailer in, but I'd say 90% of the trucks back then, they drove there and competed.
That was one of the things that pulled me in. This was probably 2006 or 7, 8, right around there, was that you could have a truck, a diesel truck. You could get these different parts for it. You could, you know, add 200 horsepower or more, depending, you know, kind of what series of parts you were doing. But then you could drive it during the week, and you could use it for work, and you could take it to test and tunes or take it to the track and have fun with it, drive it home. And so you had kind of this do-all type vehicle where if you did like performance and you did like, you know, going a little faster than a stock truck or a lot faster, you could do it. And I think that's my first impression of it at that time was I started to see people go a little bit farther. They were starting to do like different camshaft upgrades, head studs, valve springs, turbos, compound turbos. The transmissions were starting to have more options to get built, especially, you know, on the Dodge trucks. And that was kind of my first introduction to it. But I missed the beginning stage, and I was always curious how it worked, because now you post something on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or TikTok or something like that, and you can reach, you know, 10,000 people, 1 million people. You can get information You listen to a podcast or watch one, and it's so easy to access that information. I wanted to ask you from your side in organizing events for people to go to. How has it changed how you reach people in a particular state or region from those early days until what you're doing in 2024? I'm sure it's changed a lot.
Oh, it's changed quite a bit, at least 2 or 3 times. You know, the magazines have disappeared, newspapers have disappeared, TV's disappeared as far as regular local channels.
Yeah.
You know, as far as the radio in people's vehicles, I mean, they stream now, so it's very rare you get local channels. But the social media is where it's all at. We quickly jumped on that, and we have a pretty good following on our social media channels, and that's how we reach people nowadays. Back then, I advertised in newspaper, radio, TV. I mean, magazines. I had a full page ad in the magazines showing our events, and we reached a lot of them that way. But as me and you both know, those all kind of went to the side. And I could see it coming. Everybody is looking for a disposable, quick turnaround on things now. I mean, the famous line of if you can read it in the crapper for three minutes, then it's what's news, you know. So you know, that's pretty much true nowadays with the kids on the phones, you know, looking at the phones and TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram. It's all quick, so you have to constantly push stuff. And I've done even our own social media, and people actually come up to events and go, who in the world does your social media? And I'm like, yeah, well, I do. Unfortunately, I'm crazy, you know. But you know, I post not all just business stuff. You got to make it fun. This is a fun sport, so we make it fun for the people. You know, I'll post up a picture of a goofy looking truck and go, yeah, what's everybody think of this truck? You know, and you get all kinds of comments and everything. Or I'll even pull a truck up I pulled one up from 2010 last week and said, well, here's a lifted truck with big wheels back before it was popular by SEMA. 2010 in Pennsylvania. And people went, oh, that thing's ugly. Look what they did. And I'm like, guys, it's 2010. This guy was a pioneer. He did it before any of you even thought of it.
Yeah.
And then people come in and went, that's right. I remember him. He worked at so-and-so. Yeah, that was a killer truck. You know, so it's fun to look back. It's fun to see how the business has progressed. The events have progressed. We've seen it heavy on drag racing. We've seen it heavy on pulling. We've seen one go down, the other one come back up. Dyno, it was huge for a few years. Now it's on the decline. And that's because the tuners are gone, you know. And so when the tuners are gone, there's less reason for people to put their truck on the dyno and see what it can do. Yeah. So, you know, occasionally we still have dynos at events just because I have a guy I've worked with for years, and you know, we still have one at our huge East Coast Diesel Nationals in PA, and I think he easily runs, if he has time, 35 to 55 trucks a day through that thing. So it just depends on the location and what the marketplace. We try to venture out and go to different states every once in a while, just to make sure we keep the sport going in different areas that hasn't had something for a while.
Yeah, I think I was kind of just going through down memory lane when you were talking there, because I used to look forward to getting the magazines in the mail. And the first thing I would do would be open them up. I'd try to find like the truck that I had or something that pertained to that engine, find it, read it. And you would get so much information from them. And, you know, one of the questions I got asked once was, it was about the podcast. And it was, somebody said something like, why would you do a podcast? Or like, how can you talk to somebody for 45 to 60 minutes? And the thing I thought back to was way back when you would get a part, whether it was a turbo, a tuner, something like that, and you would put it on your truck and your friends were around and it was like a Saturday or Sunday, and you would take it out for a test drive and you'd come back with this huge grin on your face. And then, one of them would say, hey, well, let me go for a ride with you. And then they would want to do it to their truck. And it was that joy and excitement of doing something that really, some of us were just happy doing that. And then for others, it progressed to an engine build, a transmission build, traction bars, a whole list of things. And then you get to this other point where you say, okay, well, let me see what I can go do competing against other people and see how their trucks, stack up and who's faster and who has a quicker, 60-foot time. And for me, where I was located, there weren't a whole lot of events. There was like one per year. And I was always kind of envious of like the Midwest and the South and the Southeast, where they always had events all the time. And I've told this story on the podcast before, but like I went to an event once in the Midwest, and it was the most eye-opening experience I ever had with the thousands of people that were there. All the vendors, the stands were packed, the trucks were going, sled pulling, drag racing. And it was like, I didn't realize diesel was this popular as far as the performance side. I didn't realize families would go out and they'd spend all day in the sun to watch these trucks race. And then you could walk down vendor row and you could talk with your favorite company, and they're there and they have the product there. So now you don't have to like pay to have it shipped to you. They probably have what you want right there and you can just get it. And it's a whole experience that I think everyone needs to experience. I never find it's just once. Once you usually go to one, you kind of go to some other ones as well. I wanted to ask you about the partnership side, because that's something, it's important to us. It's important to events. It's important to, I think, any of us who focus on the community at large, is how we're able to work with different companies to, not just have the event, but then also have the companies there, to also have people there to, answer questions and do things like that. How important and how has that changed from, say, the early 2000s to now, with the type of partnerships that you have to be able to do these events and reach these people in these different states?
Well, when we started, of course, the economy was much better than it is today. All these companies would love to fly out, meet with people, talk with people. But then you had the crash of 2008, 2009. Then you had, the 2012 mini crash, and now you have COVID. And I tell you, the expenses of traveling, I know because we travel and do these shows all the time. They have quadrupled. I mean, used to I could fly from Kansas City to the West Coast for $180. Now you're looking easily $400. I mean, it's hotels. You used to be able to get beautiful Hiltons or Marriott's for $79 a night. Well, now they're $190 a night. So the companies have all cut back. They've cut back on personnel. It happened during COVID. They laid off everybody. They've cut back on budgets, the expensive travel. So again, probably around the mini crash of 2012, we started doing a sponsors tent where we actually put up displays for the sponsors in a large tent under our moniker, Diesel Motorsports. And we actually put on displays for them with literature and everything. And they can either come and stand in our tent so they don't have to haul everything around. Or I usually hire local diesel shop guys to help us at the event, and they know all about the products. And they can talk regarding the sponsors' products. So it's changed quite a bit. And that's because of the economies that has happened, not just in our industry, but everybody's industries.
Yeah.
So now it's, we go to SEMA, we have a booth at PRI. I go to 2 or 3 private meetings with industry leaders, and we talk over product. And that's changed quite a bit. Back in the early days, the 2004, 5, 6, I used to sit down with some of these companies that are behind me, and they'd go, Ron, what do we need to make? What do we need to make to get into your diesel market? And I'd go, well, let's see. Can you make a piston that's lightweight but yet sturdy? and coat it so when our guys spray nitrous on top of the piston, it doesn't burn a hole in it. Can you do that? And within 2 years, they had it on the market. Or can you make me a nice rod that when we double the horsepower from OEM, it doesn't freaking bend like a pretzel? Can you do that? And before you know it, we have that product. So, used to, and still do, I occasionally talk with them and go, hey, this is kind of messing up on these models. Can you make a fix for this? And a lot of them will step up to the plate and do it. It's a little harder now because of the manufacturing. Right now, I think we're seeing a phase of manufacturing moving back to the United States away from China. A lot of them was pushed by the industry to go to China, but then during COVID, they found, oh, that didn't work out so well.
Yeah.
And there's still a huge part shortage. From my shops, I talked to them, and I even had my truck in for some work here last month. Some parts, it took him 2 weeks to get the parts in because they just couldn't find them. And they were pretty simple parts. So, it just, the whole marketplace has changed since COVID, and everybody's trying to catch up and adjust. And it's really tough right now. So,
yeah, the big thing I hear with that is, like you mentioned, with delays on parts and how long some trucks can sit with, sometimes for months, not being able to get stuff.
Well, and I've got some, when you see a shop with 24 trucks sitting in their lot, I'd say about half of them are sitting there because they can't get the parts.
Yeah.
And, I've told a lot of my manufacturers, and they're having trouble getting parts too, and manufacturing. During COVID, they couldn't get anybody to work. They were paying top dollar to try to get people to work. I had one company that was going out to rural towns and bussing people into their factories.
Oh.
Just to get workers to. So when you think, that manufacturer's on back order, they're way behind. Well, there's a reason they're way behind, is with all the supplements the government supplied, no one wanted to work. So it's just tough all the way around, but slowly everybody's coming back to the way it should be. It's just going to take us a few years to get back to a norm. I would say a norm that's in the country. And as you know, being in the Midwest, we're the flyover states. And that's where diesel trucks are used the most, in the farming communities.
Yeah.
The flyover states. We're tend to be ignored, and things get to us last. But we have lots of good partners. Many of the companies that are with me have been with me from the very beginning. And that's because we do kind of no nonsense events. I focus a lot on street racing, street trucks, because guess what? Street trucks that's who buys my sponsors' parts.
Yeah.
So I'll pay a pretty good purse money for street racing or pulling. We held some at the Still Thunder in Muncie. We still do that. That was the first original diesel event in 2001 when there was none in the country. We still do that at the Gaston Lions Club Park in Indiana. So we had some sled pulling there, and I just asked the local guys, hey, the street trucks, well, everybody wants the hot street trucks. And I'm like, I'm all for street trucks. Let's bring them on. So, we had a lot of street trucks sign up and sled pull there, and it was lots of fun. So there for a while, we saw all street trucks in the beginning. Then it kind of went to a higher end, high horsepower trucks. Everybody wanted the bigger turbos, the bigger injectors. But then they kept blowing their drivetrain up. So then it went to trailered vehicles. Then it went to, well, we can't afford blowing our rig up every other week. So they dropped the horsepower back down. And everybody was high-end racing or pulling trucks. And then just recently, since COVID, everybody started doing, well, we miss having fun with our regular trucks. So we're starting to see a reemergence of street trucks. And in pulling, it's tough because the two tractor pulling organizations will not do street classes. We're one of the few places that still do street classes. And they have reasons for that I'm not going to go into, but they do not want any street trucks running. So, but we do. I love the street trucks. I love to see what a local guy does to his truck.
Common question we get from you guys a lot is, hey, I need a diesel engine. I either, I can't wait this long to get one, or normal place I get stuff from it just takes too long, or they don't have the parts in it that I need. Maybe my truck's not stock, or I tow heavy with it. I don't want to go back with just a stock engine. DFC Diesel is a sponsor of the podcast. We worked with them, hand in hand on doing episodes, answering technical questions. They have a complete lineup of Cummins, Duramax, and Power Stroke remanufactured engines that are set to a standard of ISO 9001 2015 standards, which is a huge deal in the aftermarket. And there's certain levels of quality testing, validation that are required for that. So when you get one of those engines, the type of quality that's built behind it with an industry-leading warranty that's really comprehensive. And the other thing with that is, sometimes the options that are out there, it's a basic OEM engine. You want a little bit more. You don't want to have the same failure again. So there's a bunch of different series of engines that they have, from core, street, tow haul, and also the Speed of Air series, which we've covered on the podcast before. There's a lot of really cool benefits to it. And if you have questions about that, reach out to them. If you don't know the type of engine that you're looking for, if you go to dfcdiesel.com, there's a ton of info there. You can send an email or you can reach out to them. Also, they're working with Speed of Air pistons, which it's the only piston that pays for itself. And there's a lot of really cool technology behind it. So you can add that into your build and be able to get better fuel economy, increase power, increase torque, and better engine life out of it. Some of the most common engine applications or series of engines that they have with that lead time, a lot of them are in stock or they have really short lead times. So you can check your favorite retailer or go to dfcdiesel.com, check them out, see what's in stock, see what you can get. If you have questions, maybe you want to do something that's outside of the normal series of engines, they have tons of choices for rods, cranks, pistons, valve train upgrades, tons of different things. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over and check them out. I think that's probably the most relatable part of this, because you can attain it. You can get the parts, you can do it. It's not like a dedicated race vehicle that you're going to have to trailer. You're going to need a support network behind you. You're going to need spare transmissions, maybe engines. You're going to need helpers. It's really hard to pull that off now, unless you're a corporation or a business. And I find that as well with like episode suggestions or guests that people want on. It's either one of two things. They either want that street truck, you want to have a little bit more fun with it, or they're looking to make the truck last. And I think that goes back to the delays with parts, and they don't want to be stuck. So they're looking into, what kind of filter should I run? What kind of oil? When should I change my transmission fluid? When should I do this, this, and this? Because they want to make that truck last. And I think especially if they're the older ones, like the pre-2007 trucks, and they want to make those last as long as possible. And I find there's a lot of great insights or things I learned from it. I think just with my age, like when I was younger, I didn't care about longevity, reliability. I didn't care how loud it was. I just wanted to go fast. Where now I'm like, I kind of want it to be a little quieter. I want to make sure it starts every morning. I want to make sure when it is, 20 degrees outside, it fires up. And what can I do? What can I do, to help that? So it's really interesting, the different sides of, this motorsports, the diesel motorsports, and to hear your insights from the beginning, until now, and how it's all evolved.
Well, like I told you before the podcast, believe it or not, I still drive a 96 12 valve. It has 300,000 miles on it now. Just barely broke in. And, originally I bought it, came out of Texas. All the ones up by me are all rusted out. So I did a series of articles in a magazine that showed how you could take a low-end, diesel truck, add parts to it, not overkill, just a little at a time, And before you know it, you have a nice truck. You can drive to events, show it off. And, once I was kind of done with it, I thought, well, should I upgrade and go to like an '07? But you know what? When I take it to events and park my old truck and lift the hood of it next to like a SEMA truck or something, that's lifted and all polished up, guess which truck all the enthusiasts are looking at? They're looking at my old 12 valve. Like, what do you do to it? What do you add on? What can, what's this thing do? And all this, So a few years back, I went, okay, I guess it starts, it runs, it performs great. I'll just keep it and keep using it and take it to the shows and let people look at it. But, people, and I think it's because they can relate to, that's what they can afford.
Yeah.
The masses can afford a lower end truck. Yeah, a SEMA truck, there's a few people that can afford a $90,000 truck and put another 20 or 30,000 in wheels and tire and lift kits on it, but not very many local people can afford that.
Well, it makes more
Usually
sense.
a business or a shop, like you said.
Yeah. Well, it makes more sense too if you're going to, pick up something that's clean and low mileage or relatively low mileage for whatever price it is, 15, 20, 25,000, whatever it might be. And then to put money into it than it is to start off at 80, 90, 100,000 and then try to put that into it. Plus it's that kind of nostalgia. I had mentioned to you before the podcast, like the truck body style that just takes me back to being a kid or a teenager was the second gen Rams. I remember the commercials on TV. I remember how it was just so revolutionary in that mid 90s time frame, the body style that it had. And I would see them out there and so whenever I see like a 12 valve or, even a second gen, and I just look at it, I don't know, there's just something kind of intangible that makes me want to ask questions or learn more about it versus the 2023 or the 2024 that they're new, they're current. You can see a bunch of them just driving around town. And so it just kind of sparks that curiosity of, how long have you had the truck? What'd you do to it? What are your plans with it? That kind of stuff.
Well, I do have to say the newer trucks are very nice for long hauling.
Yeah.
Our local budget rental brought diesel trucks back. For a number of years, the rental companies would not carry diesels. They told me because they got tired of replacing the engine because people would stop and fill it up with gas, But the budget one locally has now started carrying diesel pickups, and I mean nice diesel pickups. I mean 1-ton dualies, everything. So if I'm going to do like a 10-hour trip, yeah, I'm going to go rent one of those and make a long haul and have my back massaged while I'm driving there and
Yeah.
cool air blowing up my back and that type of thing. It's a little different than my old 96 12 valve, So I have to say the bells and whistles on the new trucks, if you can afford it, those are very nice. And of course the horsepower, I mean, they're almost 500 horse on a new truck anymore. They're not like the old trucks. I think my 96 12 valve, the factory setting was 110 horse.
Yeah, that's something that I've had some guests talk about on the podcast. Is you think back, and I remember this, like you buy a new truck now, it's close to 500 horsepower, 1,200 foot-pounds of torque. How much would people spend to take their 12 valve to that level, or their old 7.3 to that level? You'd spend a good amount of money to get it up to that power level.
Money. I know what I've spent, and it's not there yet. Mine's around 400, but I've always tried to keep my 12 valve where it's peppy.
Yeah.
But I've never wanted to do it where things start blowing up, So, yeah, I know what I spent on it, and it's not a small amount. I mean, I've got new intakes, outtakes with different intakes, different cooling system on it, different fuel plates. And believe it or not, I still run stock injectors of them. So Mainly because somebody in my position still has to have a clean takeoff, or I get penalized by the authorities. So
What would you say? Well, how many miles did you put on that 12 valve? I think you said it was about 300,000. How
it's
many of those?
300,000 miles now. I think I bought it when it had 80,000 on it.
Okay. What would you attribute to being able to go 220,000 miles on that truck? Was it a maintenance plan, a maintenance schedule you put together? What's helped it get to 300,000?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is people buy a diesel and they go, "Oh, it's a diesel; it'll go forever, and I don't have to do anything to it." Well, man, you actually have to do more maintenance. You have to change the oil, change the filters, and do regular maintenance. Probably almost double what you would on a gas truck. So if you keep the maintenance up, and I change my oil about every 5,000 miles, even though yes, the oil says it can go a lot longer. What about the filter? And I still use Mopar filters. So I just keep that up. And some of the new synthetic oils are really good for new trucks, but on that old truck, it's not that great. I still use the Amsoil Marine for diesel because it's thicker, have some of the old additives in it, and it just quiets the thing down. If I put some of this new thin synthetic in that old 12 valve, why, you couldn't even hear yourself talk on the inside. It sounds like five sewing machines sitting right next to you. So, you know what? It depends. And also, like I said earlier, I have not added items that I knew that would stress it. I mean, in the industry, I used to quote this for years. A Cummins engine, you can take it up about 38% in horsepower before you start hurting internal parts. A Duramax, about 26%. A Ford, about 11%. So keep that in mind when you start doing things. A lot of guys, when they double the horsepower on these trucks, I'm like, okay, you doubled the horsepower. Did you change these parts and these parts? Well, no. Why? Because they're not made to run 700 horse. They're not made for that amount of heat. Have you increased your brakes? Now you're at 1,000 horse truck that used to do 300 and you're still running OEM brakes. That's a little hard to stop, isn't it?
No.
And they're like, yeah, I noticed that. And I'm like, yeah, go get some high-end brakes.
There's a lot that factors into it. I think that's where, like, say, going to one of these events and chatting with you guys or the diesel shops, or if there's vendors there, it really helps to get that education. And I think with a lot of newer diesel owners that are just coming into it now, they might not have all this experience. They might not have been able to read the magazine write-ups for years, or they weren't on the forums to be able to get the information or all the other things that some of us have. And it's very easy to add power now. There's tons of choices, no matter what kind of truck you have. There's tons of parts and tons of things to do, but there's so much that factors into it, even something like wheel hop. And you get that the first time, and then you're like, oh, well, I don't want to crack my transmission case or my transfer case or something like that. And there are these little things that just factor into it. So I think it's probably something you probably, either have these conversations or right there next to the guys talking about it, is just being able to lay out that plan of where do you want to get to. And yeah, you can make that 700 horsepower, but what else are you going to need to, safely have it, make it last and not create other issues or other expenses?
Well, and that's just it. It's, you're taking an OEM platform and upping the horsepower. Well, OEM specs many of those parts not to withstand that much horsepower. So now you got to look at, well, what's important in the drivetrain and the suspension, that if I up the horsepower, how long will it last? And again, it goes back to, like you said, making the the product last longer. So that's the reason see many of the shops when people are rebuilding, and that's a huge. I just wrote a blog on it on people are rebuilding now. Well, you can spend 15, 20 grand on a rebuild motor and transmission. Well, that's still a lot cheaper than going out and spending 90 to 100,000 on a new truck.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people can finance 15 grand, but financing 90 and making a payment on it, boy, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
So you're seeing a lot of the diesel shops, and when they're going to the diesel shops, they're not looking at high horsepower. I do a survey with a lot of the diesel shops. I'll call them and go, what level of parts are you selling? And they'll say, well, you know, I'm not selling high performance quite as much, but people want just a little bit better than OEM. So in order to last longer, because I don't want to have to do this again next year, I want to wait another 5 years. So they're making their trucks last longer. I mean, the used to back in the 90s, ownership of a truck was like 5 years. S&P Global will come out with a report this spring that said people were keeping them 13 years. Well, I give it even more than that. I'd say 15 to 18 years.
Wow.
So that's a long time to keep a truck.
Yeah.
But if you run maintenance on it, keep it in good shape, keep the wheels, tires, everything in good shape, balanced, check all your greases, you know, make sure everything's lubricated. You know, a truck can last a long time.
I was just thinking of something kind of with those older trucks and the power level. And this is a very general statement, but like in the gas world, you have, you know, a new model truck comes out and it makes 30 more horsepower. And they did a bunch of different things to get that 30 horsepower. So if you have the previous year model, you're probably not going to go spend a bunch of money to get, you know, all these different components on to get that 35 horsepower. But you can take that, you know, 180 horsepower, 200 horsepower older diesel truck, and you can get it to, you know, 400 or 500, sometimes more depending on what engine it is. So you can still have that modern power level, that modern torque level. But yes, you do have to invest in a transmission and some of these other things. But that's always what has appealed to me about diesel. I didn't feel like I had to go buy the latest and greatest from a performance, a power output standpoint. Yeah, the technology and some of the things in the new ones, like a new Dodge Ram interior is probably the nicest one out there. Where it used to be, it wasn't. It didn't compare to the Ford or the GM trucks. But it's like, I can't do that, but I can make the same power or more. And then I think, how do I protect it? What type of oil am I using? What type of filters? What kind of transmission fluid am I using? Am I changing the differential fluid, you know, on time? What kind of cooling capacity do I have? Am I staying on top of these maintenance items? And I can definitely understand where those things connect. I did want to ask you about, you know, we have a lot of enthusiasts. They're all over the country. They like to go see these, you know, trucks perform. They like to, even if they're not going to race themselves, they just like to go and be around other people that share the same hobby. How can people find like your event schedule and see where you guys are going to be at, where the events are, the times, things like that?
It's easy. We've had dieselmotorsports.us for a number of years as our website. It's supported by My Race Pass, which is also tied in with a lot of the racetracks. That's their timing system, and they also do a lot of the track websites. So they keep all our information and current and keep everything up. And then also on Facebook, Diesel Motorsports, Instagram, Diesel Motorsports. I use Facebook a lot, Instagram some. YouTube, we're on it a little bit. TikTok, not much. So, you know, we're kind of easy to find if you type in Diesel Motorsports. Our official name is National Association of Diesel Motorsports, but that was too long. I got tired of saying it for so many years, so I shortened it to Diesel Motorsports, and that's kind of our moniker now, and it has been for probably 15 years. So, you know, we just keep doing events. we're all over the country. It's mostly in rural areas. I stay out of the big cities. And the rural people are the ones that seem to want to still relate and come out. It's almost like a small county fair, like you said. People walk around, they talk to each other, they like look at the trucks. They want to see two or three fast ones, then they want to race their street trucks or pull and do dyno, and everybody still stands around the dynos and see what numbers they can make and this type of thing. But it's still a fun time for everybody because they enjoy pickup trucks.
Yeah.
And ours are a little more family friendly events. We have kids, grandparents, all ages at these events. Like I said, it's kind of like a county fair. And I always have fun entertainment for everybody. And, I try to keep it that way because I want everybody to come and enjoy the scenery. I, even have some of the old guys come up and go, well, look at this, look what they did to this truck. I used to drive this truck on my farm, and they made it do this, But, I have still some of the old guys that have been running with us for years still around. I still have people like the Orange Crush with his 69 C10. It's still a killer truck that runs in the low sixes, upper fives. I mean, he's been with us ever since I think he started running in 2007. So, I mean, I've got Goldbacks, which is Vince. He's, a lot of these trucks are solid trucks that these guys know how to drag race. They've been doing it for so many years. They've got quite efficient on the timing lights. And when people start out at these strips, I actually tell the strip owners, please don't take offense, but our guys don't do this too much. So don't get frustrated. It's a little slower. Yes, we'll tell them to clean the beer cans and the rubber boots out of the bed of the truck. And, it's a little slower, but these guys aren't used to doing it. And I've actually hold training classes at some of the events. The guys go, well, we don't know how to do the lights. I'll actually take one of the older guys and say, hey, tell these young people how to work the lights. And they'll, before you know it, hey, they can't wait to come back around and race again,
That's really cool because I think it can be intimidating when you first go out there. And you have the stands, you have the lights, it's just you and another vehicle. And if you've never done it before, you don't necessarily know how to stage it and how to do all those things. So having a resource to teach people to get more enthusiasts into this is really going to be key in the future.
I was at we did the Sturgis bike event when the 8th Mile track was open up in Sturgis, and mainly because how do most of those guys get their bikes here nowadays? They're all old. They truck them there with diesel trucks. So I went up there and held an event. Well, I had a bunch of young people on the side of the track. There was probably 12 of them there. And they were all newer, fancier trucks. And I drove up and I go, what are you guys just showing up to watch? You aren't going to race your trucks? And several of them said, well, we're afraid of them breaking. And we can't get back home. And I said, well, it's an 8th Mile track. I said, you go on an on-ramp and floor it, don't you? On the highway? Well, yeah. I go, well, it's about the same. You're not going to get much over 70 or 80 miles an hour. And I said, tell you what, I'll take 3 of you right now. See that old 96 12 valve? I drove 11 and a half hours here in it. I'll go race you right now for free, show you how to work the lights. And I'm going to drive back home in that. They're like, you drove up here in that old thing? And I'm like, yeah, but I'll even race you and show you how it works. So 3 of them come down. Well, yeah, hell yeah, for free. I'll take you up on that. I'll beat your ass, Well, I won 2 out of 3, so that's pretty good for an old 96 12. But guess what? 10 of the 12 guys signed up to start racing.
That's cool. That's what's all about.
I don't mind getting my hands dirty and going in and talking to the guys and going, what are you afraid of? And this is the fun of it. Take your truck, even if you don't go very fast, go down the track. That's the fun of it, you know?
Yeah.
And pulling, same way on pulling, most guys go, well, you have to have I go, no, actually, that truck on work stock is set. We actually have a true work stock, which is not stock appearing. It is the original turbo that come with the truck. It is a true work stock. That sled can set its settings where it's 5,000 ton weight. Can you pull a 5,000 pound trailer? Well, yeah, I do it all the time. Well, then you can pull. So sign up. You can pull, show off in front of everybody, show them your pulling skills. And it won't hurt your truck. It's like pulling a 5,000 pound trailer. So before you know it, now they're into that. Well, guess what, Patrick? That's how you get them into the sport. Then they're like, ooh, that was fun. Maybe I need to add some stuff to my truck now, you know.
Yeah. there it starts. Well,
it starts.
It was really cool to chat with you, Ron. I appreciate you taking me down kind of the history of the motorsports side and then how things have evolved, how they're changing, and then ways that we can get involved. We don't have to have a crazy truck. We don't have to make a ton of power. It really is what you mentioned. The fun of it is just being, whether it's a drag strip or sled pulling with bone stock power. That's where it starts, and it is really fun. It's something fun to do, and you can get hooked by it, or you might just do it once, but at least you can say that you did it. So I appreciate your time today, chatting with us. I look forward to next year when you have a bunch of these events. I'll definitely make sure and bookmark your website. I do follow you guys already on social media, but encourage everyone to give you guys a follow, check it out, and stop by one of your events. So I appreciate your time today.
Not a problem. Dieselmotorsports.us, and come see us at booth 1835 at the PRI show. And this year we're actually doing a seminar with the University of Ohio Diesel Club on Saturday in room 204 at 10 o'clock on the future of diesel. And I'm going to have a panel of young students asking some of us older guys that have been in it for years questions.
Oh, very cool.
So educational seminar. And we'll be set up for that on Saturday, December 14th. So, yeah, we're trying to get everybody involved and look forward to seeing the podcast and sure appreciate the time. And I want to thank Amsoil because they're the ones that helped set this up. And yes, I still use it in my truck, greases, everything. I mean, so appreciate that partnership. And, of course, the products that I've used for years.
Awesome. Thanks again, Ron.
All right. Thank you.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 40 TDP 2024. Get you 40% off MSRP. So it's a great way to save some money. Get some cool gear if you're in the market for a new EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house. They've got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, handle designs, different opening mechanisms, and their whole lineup's designed to meet any budget that you might have. So head on over their site, use that code, and save some money to get some cool gear. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters, Tyler Loewen of 23 Diesel, CUTTERUP Rob, J Cole, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube and podcast apps, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 8 of the Diesel podcast and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want here in 2024. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.